airport. Yeah. Or somewhere.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Happy December to you. Welcome to the Dare County Board of Commissioners, December the 2nd, 2019 Board of Commissioners meeting. At this time, I'm honored to have the Reverend Keith Dye bring us an invocation this morning. Reverend Dye, thank you for being here.
I'm not sure where I'm supposed to stand.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We don't have a podium this morning because we have some guests.
Take away a preacher's pulpit. Let us pray. Gracious and benevolent God, as we enter this season of expectation and hope, we come before you praying that you will continue to fill this county's leadership with wisdom and its citizens with compassion. We are thankful for the talent that fills this space and the great potential that is within our grasp. So we praise you for youthful voices, for intelligent minds, for dedicated employees, for the guidance of our commissioners, and we pray for your spirit to fill all who work together to make this beautiful place a welcoming home for many and a place of refreshment for many more. We pause to reflect on those we love and those we miss. We give thanks for the lives of those who have gone before us. We ask you to comfort those who mourn. We pray that you will lift us up to move forward in service to you and to one another. Watch over us that our words and actions reflect the love you have for your creation, and that we who have been blessed will be a blessing. Amen.
Amen. May we stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we go to item 1 on the agenda, I'd like to welcome B. Bass Knight is here with us this morning, from Chairman of the Dare County Board of Education. We also have Mr. Artie Tillett, who's school administration, and we certainly have Superintendent John Farley. Thank y'all all for being here this morning. It's my honor to be able to recognize this group, and I'm going to ask the Board of Commissioners if they'll step away from the dais so they can come down and enjoy this beautiful music from First Flight High School from John Beauford and his students. And while they're setting up, I would certainly like to have a moment of silence. We lost a dear friend this week, Mr. Ray Sturzer, who was the planning director for the county for many years and a citizen of Kill Devil Hills and former mayor of Kill Devil Hills. So if we can have a moment of silence. Thank you, everyone. I'll ask the commissioners if they'll go down. And John, thank you for being here this morning. We are excited to, the school administration and the schools are always very, very, very supportive in helping us to kick off the December meetings with our Board of Commissioners. And I want to thank you and your students for being here this morning. Thank you, John.
Jesus We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Good tidings to you wherever you are. Good tidings for Christmas and a Happy New Year. Now bring us a figgy pudding. Now bring us a figgy pudding. Now bring us a figgy pudding and Prince of out here. Good tidings to you wherever you are. Good tidings for Christmas and a Happy New Year. For we are like figgy pudding, for we are like figgy pudding, for we are like figgy pudding, so bring some out here. Good tidings to you wherever you are. Good tidings for Christmas and a Happy New Year. We wish you a Merry Christmas, we wish you a Merry Christmas, we wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Thank you so much, John. We appreciate you being here and your students. And we hope that you all have a very, very Merry Christmas. And thank you for being here this morning. Appreciate it. In its place for presentations. Thank you all for doing this for us this morning.
Good morning.
If we're ready, yes, ma'am.
Good morning. I'm Cheryl Anby, the clerk to the board, and at the first meeting in December, the board elects its chairman and a vice chairman, and at that election, it's run by the clerk. In accordance with Robert's Rules of Order, there'll be no second necessary for a motion, and in keeping with parliamentary procedure, it'll take only 4 votes to elect a chairman, okay? So I now open the floor for nominations.
I nominate Bob Woodard.
I have a nomination for Bob Woodard from Commissioner Bateman. Are there any further nominations? If there are no other nominations, I declare nominations closed. So as we do the voting, I'm going to ask you to raise your hands and keep them raised until the votes are formally recorded and announced. Those in favor of Commissioner Woodard, kindly raise your hand. I have votes are unanimous. I'm showing 6 votes in favor of Chairman Woodard to continue, and this will be his 6th term as chairman of this board. And with those votes, I announce that Chairman Woodard is our chairman for this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, board, for your confidence. I really appreciate your support. We're looking forward with our continued relationship and doing what we feel is right for Dare County, and I appreciate that. This brings us to item 3 on our agenda, and that's the election of the vice chair. And once again, this will not require a second. So I will open the floor for the nomination of vice chair.
Nominate Commissioner Wally Overman.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Ross. There's a motion on the floor to nominate Commissioner Overman as vice chair for the coming year. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, then those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Pose like sign. Congratulations, Vice Chairman. Yeah. And this will be the Vice Chair's 6th term as Vice Chair as well. So with that, it brings us County Manager. I'll turn the agenda over to you.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations. That brings us to item 4 on the agenda, and that's the chairman's opening remarks.
Okay, I need to come down front for this. Well, we may have to. I'm not going to come down front. We asked this presentation to be done at about 9:30, so I'm a few minutes ahead of time. So if it's okay with the board, we will come back to item 4, if that's okay with the board, once we see that the folks have arrived. County Manager?
And that brings us to item 5, and it's the presentation of the county service pins. This morning we have one. If Wilma Parks would please come forward to receive her 20-year peer from Sally Laws.
Good morning, ladies.
Good morning. I'm Sally Laws, and this is Wilma Parks receiving her 20-year pin, and I'm thrilled to be here to honor Wilma. So I want to make a few quick remarks about Wilma. She is very calm in all situations that are trying. I've never heard her raise her voice with any type of frustrating phone call or situation in the office. She's persevered through 3 databases over at the Department of Social Services, the original being Pen and Ink, and we've also gone through 2 other databases, and she still hangs around for all of those changes. She's also, I like to consider her the office historian. She can tell you about any person, place, thing, situation from 20 years ago. So if you ever need to know anything about anything, you go to Wilma, and she will have a story or a comment and just a memory of anything you need to know. She's also a great team player. She works well with both the citizens of Dare County and her colleagues. One thing about Wilma is on-call at social services often creates angst for a lot of people. And Wilma, she doesn't even think twice of it. She actually even volunteers her time doing on-call with another organization in the county. So we thank you for that. Just 2 quick personal comments about Wilma. I consider her to be quite a foodie, so she can tell you where to go eat, whether it's Bertie County, Atlanta, or Thailand. She knows where to go. And being here 20 years, she has been quite a traveler, and being here for that longevity has let her accrue quite a bit of time to go to all of these places, including like Bertie County, but across the world to travel. She can tell you where to go off the beaten path. So she's just a very unique individual. So thank you, Wilma, for all that you do and all that you bring to the office.
Wilma, thank you for your 20 years of service. I know exactly what you folks do. Y'all are hard working. It's really an honor to see what you do for our citizens in Dare County. So thank you for that loyalty and that dedication. And by the way, where can we get some good Thai food?
Bangkok.
That's what I figured. That's what I figured.
Right about that.
That was great.
Next, if Debbie Dutton would come forward to present the Employee of the Month.
Good morning, Debbie. Good to see you.
Good morning, Commissioners. It is my pleasure to be here and to be able to present this award. And I would like to thank you for your continued support of this honor for the county employees. It's going to be hard to keep this a secret when I start reading this collection of sentiments from her coworkers. But on a daily basis, this individual wears many hats. Her team has the utmost respect for her ability to lead in a way that seems effortless. Being responsible for her own school, students, staff, and her school nurse health team is not an easy job. She continually amazes her staff and peers with her organizational skills and ability to remain consistent in her demeanor, even when things get a little challenging. She inspires and supports her school nurse team. She takes pride in her team and recognizes them in her own special and thoughtful way. Through her gift of generosity, she inspires them continually, recognizing each other, which has made them an amazing team for the better. She is quick to recognize and praise the accomplishments and successes of her team and the individual, both professionally and personally. She has the encompassing ability to relate, praise, empathize, and encourage her team to be the best that they can be, and provides opportunity for growth as a person and an employee. She has been a very encouraging leader who makes each member of her team feel that they are making a positive difference and contributing to the goals of the school health program. Above all, her team members feel respected and valued. She is fair and equitable. She knows when to seek a group opinion and when she needs to make the executive decision. She makes every effort to seek team input on decisions that can be made collectively. Her skills have formed a strong team who are inspired to network and problem solve. She tackles challenges head-on and welcomes her team's input in coming up with solutions. She has embraced the art of mindfulness and urges each member of her team to take time for themselves, no matter what form that takes. She inspires her team in many ways, whether it be providing a chance to practice relaxation at a team meeting, writing a personal note of encouragement, encouraging positive self-care, or providing guidance on the task at hand. She has created a positive environment for our school nurse team, which is a true reflection of her leadership. She values team spirit and the importance of building and maintaining a healthy and positive workplace culture. She's a wonderful role model who practices and leads with superior skills, care, and compassion. She is creative, intelligent, uplifting, and has a true passion for school health. She exhibits strength and integrity. She has the full respect of each and every member of her team. She is always available for guidance and support when needed and keeps the whole school health team abreast of new changes within the program and within the health department. Very rarely do you find someone who is able to manage the role of peer as well as supervisor and to do it both at 100%. Jody exemplifies what professional practice is and is a true essence of a role model, a person that her team can look up to for answers, come to for support and advice, and strive to live up to her expectations. Some words from the school nurse who took her position when she was promoted to the supervisor. Knowing that I would be filling Jody's position meant that I really had big shoes to fill. From day one, I could see the impact that Jody had made on Manio Elementary School. It was very clear that students and staff love and respect her. It is my honor to present Employee of the Month to Jody Wyant. Thank you.
Jody, congratulations on behalf of the board. What an honor it is for you to be chosen as Employee of the Month. Thank you for
Yes, sir.
your loyalty and your dedication.
Thank you.
That brings us to item 7 on the agenda, which is the public comment. Before we go into public comment, those of you that received an award would go right out through this door to get a picture made, and I'll wait just a second for you all to get out before we go to public comment.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, man.
Ladies and gentlemen, now's the time that's been set aside for public comment. If you have public comment this morning and you've not signed up already, please raise your hand. When you do, I'll recognize you. Please come to the podium, state your name and where you're from. There's a green light that will come on when your time begins. You have to limit your comments to 5 minutes. When the yellow light comes on, you have about a minute left, and when the red light comes on, you should conclude your remarks. On the sign-up sheet, first I have Jesse Davis.
Welcome this morning, Mr. Davis.
Good morning. My name is Jesse Davis. I live here in Manio, and I'm here to advocate for the building of mountain bike trails in Dare County for recreational amenity. I think everybody knows what a mountain bike is. It's a big tire bicycle that is intended to ride off-road. Mountain bike trails don't really go anywhere. They don't take you across town. They don't take you from one side of the island to the other. They're strictly there for fun and exercise. They can be used for hiking or jogging or dog walking or bird watching also. You can see on a handout that I provided that they utilize a very small space and put a lot of trail in there, kind of like a spaghetti noodle or something on the map. I travel a lot, and I have an app on my phone which tells me where all the mountain bike trails are. So if I'm in Florida or Maryland or Virginia, I can find them on my app and I can go to these places and ride these trails. And they're usually located in a park that has a playground and a ball field and a soccer field. And in the woods around the park, they've put in trails. And they can be 2 miles or 4 miles or 8 miles, depending on the size of the park. And while I'm there, I usually try to talk to people either in the parking lot or out on the trail and kind of get the story, find out how the trails got built. And every place has their own story. I was in San Lee Park recently, which is in Lee County near Sanford. It's a county park. I was there to ride the mountain bike trails, and I was getting set up in the campground by a guy who had been running that park for 30 plus years. So I asked him, I said, how did mountain bike trails come to San Lee Park? And he said, well, he said about 20 years ago, a fellow thought it'd be a good idea. So we pitched it to the county, and the county voted on it, and the county approved it. So we started building mountain bike trails, and we've been adding on ever since. And this guy did not strike me as a mountain biker, but he was really proud of those trails. And the next morning, the parking lot had 50 people in there that were there to ride the trails. So it's a bit of a draw. Another thing that comes up when I'm at these places is people want to know where I'm from, and I say, oh, well, I'm from the Outer Banks, and they're like, oh, we love the Outer Banks. You know, what do we have, you know, what can we ride, where can we ride our mountain bikes when we go to the Outer Banks? And I say, well, nothing, but I'm working on it, and which is why I'm here. And I'm also working with the town manager of Manio He's trying to get me a spot in the January meeting to give a video presentation. And I have my contact information on that sheet. If anybody has any questions, they can email me or they can call me. And I think it would be a cool thing. We're that kind of county, and I think that it's a relatively inexpensive way to utilize a small area of land and add a amenity to our recreational list. And thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Davis. We appreciate it.
Next is Carl Canute. Carl Lee. All right, next is Shannon Brooks.
Welcome this morning, Ms. Brooks.
Thank you. I'm here this morning on behalf of North Carolina Cooperative Extension. We, many years ago, purchased 2 vans, and we have gotten so much use out of them, so much fun has occurred because of those vans, education for our youth here in Dare County. Well, these veteran vans were so old that my 4-H agent looked at me and said, Shannon, Miss Shannon, they are older than me. Well, lots of things are older than our 4-H agent, but I'm just here today to simply say thank you for approving this budget line item. I know one little line item is just a line item sometimes, but this means the world to us, and it means the safety of our kids, and we just greatly appreciate it. So thank you very much. And when I told the kids I was coming here today, they were at the office last week, some of them, and they decided to make a thank you. So with your permission, I'll pass this forward.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shannon. We appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Anyone else like to speak at public comment? Please come forward.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Doug Brindley. I have recently been selected by the Outer Banks Association of Realtors to be representative on the Tourism Board. So I'm here this morning to ask for your support in that appointment when it comes up in the future meeting. I have 30 years' experience in this crazy business of vacation rentals, and I look forward to helping the board make decisions to put heads in beds in Dare County.
Thank you, Mr. Brindley.
Other public comment this morning. Anyone else here for public comment? Any public comment from Buxton?
No comment from Buxton.
Hearing none, then we would move on. Are we ready to go back up to the chairman's update?
I believe we are, Mr. County Manager. That brings us to item 4 in Chairman's update, and I just have one item this morning to cover, and I'll come down front to do so.
That's nice of 4-H. Hey, Wally.
Our board always has the pleasure of making these types of presentations to our businesses and our citizens throughout the community. In this particular incident this morning, we had to pull a lot of strings and tell a few little white lies and just to entice a few folks to be here this morning. And it's my privilege this morning to talk about one of the hallowed traditions of the Outer Banks, and that's our commercial fishing industry. The backbone of the industry are the families out here that have dedicated their lives to putting healthy Outer Banks seafood on American tables. Today, it's my honor on behalf of our board to recognize a family who has committed their lives to commercial fishing. The Beasley family of Collington has served the people of the Outer Banks in an exemplary way since 1971, 48 years. You probably hear their granddaughter doing commercials for them. I've had the pleasure of going over there many, many times and getting seafood for my family, and I continue to do that. As a matter of fact, Bill has actually opened up. He closes in November, end of November, but he's actually opened up for me before so I could come over there and get some crab meat that was still on hand. But when Bill and his wife Judy started Billy Seafood, little did they know that they would start a family tradition that would become the Outer Banks trademark. Under the guidance of Billy Beasley and his wife Judy, the family business has flourished in spite of the regulations that we continue to see that are put on our commercial fishing industry. Today, sons Tommy and Joby are keeping the family tradition alive. I'm going to ask the family if they'll come forward at this time. We pulled one over on you, didn't we, Judy? I just saw her in the store the other day. She said, "You better come by and get some seafood. We're closing, Bob." Billy, come on up here.
I'm married and naked.
I know, brother, but you're here, and we're happy to have you here. Come on beside me. Good to see you.
Yes, sir. My brother couldn't make
Yes,
it.
all right, I understand. I'm going to read this plaque, Billy and Judy, to you guys. It's presented to the Beasley family in grateful recognition of their leadership and commitment to the commercial fishing industry of the Outer Banks and the service that Billy Seafood has provided to the public of Dare County. The Dare County Board of Commissioners salutes the Beasley family for preserving the Dare County's commercial fishing heritage and the efforts of Billy Beasley and his wife Judy that are being carried out today by sons Tommy and Joby. And it's signed by myself, Chairman of the Dare County Board of Commissioners. We can't thank y'all for 48 years continued providing seafood to the citizens of Dare County. What a privilege and an honor it is for me to, on behalf of the board, to make this presentation to you guys.
Thank you, Bob. Come on, guys, stand up.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Judy actually thought we had one more shot at NCDOT on that road up there. That's how we got them to come here. They were fired up. They were coming this morning.
That's the truth.
Come, yeah, get in here. Absolutely. Thank you all so much, Judy. God bless you. God bless you. Billy, thank you. God bless you.
And you did have them fired up.
Thank you. I tell you what, folks, if you go over there in the summertime, anytime, they're rocking and rolling, and they're selling some seafood, and you can't get any better seafood on the Outer Banks than Billy's Seafood. So once again, thank y'all for what y'all do for our citizens. Very much appreciated. County Manager?
Chairman, that brings us to item 8 on the agenda. We have Terry Gray, Shane Baum, and others here to make a presentation to you on the Dare County Motorcycle Toy Run.
Good morning, Terry.
Good morning. How are y'all this morning?
Very good, thank you.
Good. It's a tough act to follow with the First Flight Chorus up here and then the Beasley family. But I think we've got some information and ammo here that we can at least come up to the same level. We thank you for being here. This is the 4th presentation we've made to y'all for the Dare County Motorcycle Toy Run. We have come to learn that it takes partnerships to make our event successful. And that's exactly what we've done. I've got some people with me today that are on my board of directors, and I'd like to introduce them to you. Shane Baum, who is our assistant director. Hopefully he'll be doing this next year, and I can take a back seat. That's the plan anyhow.
You don't get that easy.
I have our finance guru, Sam Ballard, or he's our treasurer, and we have Chris DeCou. And we have a new addition. We have decided that we wanted to reach out to another group in the area, and that's the Cat 5 Jeepers. So now we have become the Dare County Motorcycle Jeep Toy Run for this particular event. And with that, we have Rich Paul and his wife, Marie, who is the president of the Cat 5 Jeepers. Valuable people, and they have helped us tremendously. As a matter of fact, Rich is the one that put together our video today that you'll be seeing. Phenomenal. We'd like to thank some people while we're here. One entity that supports us 110% is Vertigo Tattoo. They make their facility available to us in Mans Harbor, and we put on several events over there. And Johnny Waters, who is a local singer, he is a very good supporter of ours. He did this year. He actually wrote a theme song for us. There are other groups that are involved, local motorcycle groups. Dare County Sheriff's Department, big supporter of ours. As you know, they lead our ride each year, and we're very thankful for that. Local municipalities. We had another group that joined us this year, the Garage Band Charities. That group puts on the OBX Rod and Custom Festival. They helped us tremendously and got us off to a good start. I want to give you a little bit of history. I'm going to actually let Shane do a rundown on the toy run, but I want to give you a little history of our group. The first year, we raised $14,000, and we helped about 400 kids in Dare County. We bought Christmas for them, and it was a big boost to them. The second year was $25,000, and the third year was $32,000. This year, we are projecting to finish with raised monies of about $42,000. That's a 300% increase from our first year.
Phenomenal.
It speaks highly of how giving the community is. Because all this money that we raise and all these toys that we get come from local individuals and businesses. They support us to no end. This type of increase allowed us to increase not only our giving to the sponsoring or to the recipients, but it let us increase our scholarships that we started last year. We started 3 scholarships for Dare County: Manny on the mainland, Hatteras Island, and the northern beaches. This year we were able to increase that from the $500 level to $1,000 for each scholarship. We're excited about that as well. We have started doing different charity events, as part of our group. This year we have had about 3 of those events and raised money for individuals in the area. We're proud of that as well. And then we have an invitation that came to us to participate this year in the 5th annual Coastal Virginia Custom Auto Show. They wanted to introduce motorcycles in it. Last year they tried to do that, and they had about 6 motorcycles. They reached out to us and said, hey, can you come up with some motorcycles to be in this show? And we came up with about 18 motorcycles, and we went into this show, and they had about 50 contestants. We had the Dare County banner waving high. We took 5 out of 6 awards and brought them back to the county. So we're doing a lot of good work out there. And our success rate speaks highly of the people that you see standing behind me and the community. We're going to participate even more at a higher level as far as different groups and shows and stuff. And that's why we've raised our banner, and we're now the Dare County Motorsports Charity Group. So you'll be hearing that name, plus we'll have events like the Toy Run. I don't have much further to say, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shane, let him tell you a little bit about the Toy Run, and he'll give a nod to our producer back here so he can show you the video. I think y'all will enjoy it. Mr. Chairman, I like your coat. It sets off the festive mood. And if y'all will look beside your monitor, you'll see Santa Claus has been here. We've dropped off a little token of our appreciation to y'all. We've got some event shirts that we bought and shared with you. So, Mr. Shane Baum, if you'll take over.
Good morning. My name is Shane Baum. As Terry said, I'm the deputy director. Our toy run, we had about 119 bikes and 42 Jeeps in this year's ride. And it was, if you're one of the ones that was on the side of the road watching as we went by, it was quite a spectacle. And for those of us that were riding, it was awesome to see all the support from people coming out. It's starting to get a little bit of momentum, kind of like a parade. People are coming out to look and see us come. They know we're there each year. And we raised about $6,500 on just this event, which is a huge asset to the $42,000 he said we raised. I guess without further ado, I'll go ahead and if he'll pull up the video, we'll show you what the toy run was about.
We opened it up for skydiving this year. Rick, easy to review, so pretty neat.
So he comes in as fast as one of those motorcycles.
They said it made 7 miles an hour when he first started his descent.
Man, look at the Jeep.
And
We'd like to take a couple more seconds and make some presentations.
Absolutely,
To the
Terry.
sheriff. If we could call up Sheriff Doug Dowdy and his two deputies, George Faulkner.
If you manage a team, you have to try Monday.com. Monday.com is a platform to track everything.
These guys are essential to us, and I'll tell you, if you think that Dare County services aren't important, I had firsthand experience the other day with using Dare Headlights. Thank you very much for that. But these guys here are phenomenal because they orchestrate with all the different municipalities the law enforcement involvement in this, and it lets us go 4 years without an incident or an accident. And a lot of that credit goes to these guys right here. We still haven't gotten the sheriff on a motorcycle yet, but I'm working on that. I'm working on that very hard. So, yeah, if we could make this presentation to you, Sheriff, for the Sheriff's Department's involvement.
We thank you greatly for y'all's involvement.
Thank you very much.
It's a huge help to us.
We appreciate you letting us do it.
And come on right up here, because we're gonna get a picture here in a minute. Okay. All right. And Mr. George Faulkner.
George is instrumental in scheduling and planning all of the different departments and leading us along, and we couldn't do it without you.
That's right.
That's the state trooper in it.
Mr. Walston.
And then Dustin Walsh, thank you for helping to lead us as well.
Come on up here, friend. These guys make Dare County proud, I'm telling you.
Thank you, buddy. Always a pleasure.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Chairman, I wanted to use this opportunity to also make a presentation to the Cat 5 Jeep Club.
Yes, sir.
They have helped us tremendously with labor to put this event on. And Rich, on behalf of the Dare County Motorcycle Toy Run, we want to present you with this appreciation. Thank you so much. I will tell you the better part of you right there. Mr. Chairman, that's our presentation. We're going to make one more contribution here to the DARE services. We have a check for DARE services. If we can call up Amy, we'll make that check presentation to her.
Absolutely.
This year, we're going to donate $16,500 to DARE services.
Super.
Oh, wow. Cool.
There you are. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Chris?
Thank you for helping me too.
Oh, thank you, guys. Thank you.
If we turn around here, we can get a picture with everybody. Come on, squeeze in here, guys. Great. Good job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Next year, I want to see you in the.
Well, I was getting ready to tell you, Terry, Shane, I'm sorry I missed it this year, but I will certainly have it on my calendar and not let anything interfere with that, because I definitely want to ride my Harley along with you guys. And
Fourth Saturday in September.
Pardon?
Fourth Saturday in September.
That's what I got it written down. Terry has told me that, and I will not let anything interfere with that, because I want to ride this year. I was biting at the bullet to ride this year, and I had a conflict. I had to do something for the county, and I just couldn't get it, but I'm looking forward to it.
And I will lend you a helmet if you want to bring the vice chairman with you.
There you go. Well, I don't know.
Say Jeep.
I don't know that he'd want to ride on the back with me, Terry. So.
But I'll be right there beside you in my Jeep. So.
There you go. Thank y'all so much for what you do. Terry, you went so fast with the numbers, but since y'all been doing this, I think it's exceeded 6 figures, and that's phenomenal. And my hat's off to what y'all do. Incredible.
Couldn't do it without a giving county.
Absolutely. So, thank you.
Chairman, that leads us to item 9 on the agenda, and that's the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financing Reporting, and give that back to you.
Okay. I moved a little quick, but I'll speak loud. I don't think I ever have a problem with talking too loud. I took the lavalier off for this next presentation. Moved a little too quick, David. But what I'm about to do is, hang on. Thing weighs 50 pounds. This is something that the board certainly is very, very proud of. I have Dave Clausen up here, Finance Director. The Government Finance Office Association established this annual financial reporting award program back in 1991 to encourage local governments to extract information from their comprehensive annual financial report to produce reports that are accessible and easy to understand to those without a background in finances. This is the 28th year that Dare County has received this prestigious certificate of achievement for excellence in financial reporting. And that's every year since they implemented this in 1991. So Dave, on behalf of the association, 28 years, this plaque's got like three more spots on it, but I hope the next plaque they make might be a little bit less heavy, but this, you're gonna have to have something pretty strong hanging this, Jesse, on the wall, but you got 3 more spots on here, but congratulations to you and your staff for what you do. I can tell you this, folks, Dave is phenomenal finance director. We are very, very fortunate in Dare County to have somebody of his talent and caliber to put this budget together. And I know my board echoes that, and especially Commissioner Ross, who comes from a extensive financial background in his career, and he has nothing but the highest respect for David and what he does for our county. So David, on behalf of the board, Certificate of Achievement of Excellence in Financial Reporting is presented to you and your staff. Thank you. You didn't know you'd stand up here with Santa Claus this morning, did you? Sally, I have a presentation for Sally as well, but she's in some training this morning and she couldn't be here. But this is award of financial reporting achievement to Sally DeFosse, Assistant Finance Director of the Dare County Board of Commissioners. So please give our thanks to Sally for what she does, Dave. Appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Well done, Dave.
County Manager.
Next, Mr. Chairman, Dave Alberg with the Monitor National Marine Sanctuary is here to give us a report on sanctuary activities.
Good to see you again, David.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and happy belated Thanksgiving to all of you. I appreciate the time this morning. I have a few things I want to just make sure that we're keeping the county up to date on. I think all pretty good news. The first one relates to, my timing is just off. I wish the Beasleys had still been here, but related to a regulatory action within the Monitor National Marine Sanctuary. As you know, we've been looking at a boundary expansion, which is ongoing, but in the course of doing that, and I don't have an update on that effort, but in the course of doing that, we came across a National Marine Fisheries regulation that goes back to 1975, prohibiting all types of fishing within the Monitor National Marine Sanctuary. Geographically, that's not a huge deal because it's a relatively small area. But we have been working with the National Marine Fisheries Service to get that repealed. And within the next few weeks, I suspect you're going to see a notice in the Federal Register opening up public comment on that. And what it would do, the Sanctuaries Act, the restrictions on trawling within the monitor sanctuary would remain, but this restriction, which is outdated and serves no purpose, to prohibit all other types of fishing, hook and line, trawl, and other types of fishing, if this goes through, would be repealed. So I just want to give you a heads up that you're going to see that. This is an action being taken by the National Marine Fisheries Service, but it was initiated by our office to try to get this taken off. And if you've got any questions when that comes up, I'm certainly here at any point to answer that. But I think the intent was, and you demonstrated it so nicely, about the importance of commercial fishing in the county. We've been very sensitive to this as we've been doing our analysis and continuing to do that analysis. And this was one of the first things that we felt we could do fairly quickly to get that corrected. So with that, if there are any questions about that, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions, board? Commissioner Count?
How you doing, Dave?
Hey, nice to see you, sir.
Yes, sir. Just for clarification's sake, the trawl side would remain, but other types would be, if you want to recreational fish over top of it, drift fish.
Yep, absolutely. And the trawling thing, to be quite frank, if there were commercial fishermen in the room, and I know there are a couple, is really a moot point at this point. The trawl fishery is in the Sound. And commercial trawling, for the most part, is either midwater or has moved far north. But the prohibition within this 1 mile area at the monitor on bottom trawling would stay in place.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I have one question also. We all know the wheels of government move very slowly.
Very.
Do we have any idea on time frame on a repeal process?
If they do public comment here, if that is released for a 60-day public comment period, I would, who knows what comments we'll get, but I would be hard pressed to think anyone's going to be opposed to that. But I would assume probably in the spring to early summer that would be pulled back. Yeah. All right. Just some other things that, again, I think are positive stories. We are right now entering the last year of the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II celebrations. And to that end, we have received some grant monies to do a pretty significant telepresence project next August 12th through the 26th. And what we will be doing, we'll be working off one of NOAA's large white fleet boats to go out to a series of targets, including the Monitor and a number of these World War II wrecks, and then broadcast live from those sites to museums, aquaria, libraries, and a number of places around the country. Of course, the aquarium at Roanoke Island will be one of those places. We're going to be working with Joe Schwartzer, hopefully to be able to broadcast there as well. But the public will be able to access this from the internet or from some of these venues. And we're very excited because it'll be a great way. These are all wrecks everyone knows about, so we don't have the chance of going out and not finding anything. We know where we're going to be going to. And the video should be pretty impressive, and it also will be interactive. So the schools and the aquarias and the venues where this is being broadcast will be able to call in, text, email, ask questions, and make that interactive. So I'll have more on that as the details begin to flesh out. But that is what the Monitor Sanctuary is hoping to do to honor the 75th anniversary of the end of the war. We continue to work with Clay Titterman and Principal Beth Rooks down at Cape Hatteras Secondary School. I think Shannon Rickles did a presentation here in October. We've been able to fund them for 2 years, and hopefully we'll fund them again in August for a 3rd year. They've done a great job on a recycling program, which has now gone school-wide. Again, in the big picture of things, it was not a terrible amount of money, but it was something that we hope motivates the students, gives them some leadership opportunities, and benefits the community to the best that we can. I also wanted to announce that on Veterans Day, this last November 11th, NOAA dedicated the first National Marine Sanctuary to be created in 20 years at Mallows Bay in the Potomac River. It's about an 18 square mile area. It is known as the Ghost Fleet. These were all World War I wrecks that were rushed into production when America was gearing up for the First World War. The war ended before most of them could be put into service, and so they all ended up in this little area at Mallows Bay, Maryland. And what makes it so incredible is they've all sunk to the bed of the river, but have become this amazing kayaking place and a really remarkable ecosystem, pretty unique in the country. But also there's Revolutionary War wrecks there. There are at least one Civil War wreck. But big deal. We work very closely with the state of Maryland on this, and if it's of interest to the commissioners, I'm happy to get the superintendent to come down and give you an informational 5-10 minute presentation specific to Mallows. It's pretty, in some ways, different from what we've been working on off the coast of North Carolina, but in its principle, it's the same. It's about maintaining access, preserving the story and honoring the story, and I think you might find it very interesting. And then the last item, just to give you a heads up on, is that we have our Sanctuary Advisory Council meeting next Friday, the 13th at CSI at 1 o'clock, and certainly all of you are welcome if you can attend. And Mr. Chairman, that is my report for today, unless there are any questions.
Thank you so much, David. Commissioner Couch, I believe, has another question.
Just as a shout out, Dave, you know, when you get into the schools, and I'm speaking specifically down there, Hatters with Clay Dieterman, he's a young guy, the kids connect with him. And when you single out somebody like that who has an impact on young children's lives, that's a big bang for your buck. He's pretty awesome. And the kids just, they all want to be in his class.
That's good. I've met him a few times, and he's a pretty remarkable guy.
UNC Wilmington guy.
Yeah. We've done, when we do training sessions and things, I've done a number of international trainings, and one of the sort of icebreakers that we always do is to try to identify moments in an individual's life where somebody had an influence that steered them one way or another, and he will be one of those people for a number of these kids, I'm certain, and they look back on their lives that had a big influence. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Thanks, Dave. We'll see you on the 13th.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, item 11 on the agenda, Sheila Davies and Kelly Netton are here to present the 2019 Community Health Assessment.
Good morning, ladies, and thank you,
Good morning.
Sheila, for agreeing to do this.
Absolutely. So every 4 years in North Carolina, public health departments are required to participate and conduct a community health needs assessment. And actually, every 3 years, it's an IRS requirement for nonprofit hospitals to conduct a community health needs assessment. So we partnered a number of years ago with the Outer Banks Hospital, and we now do our community health needs assessment on a 3-year cycle. That way we meet both of the requirements. And the premise behind this and these requirements is to make sure that you have agencies looking at what are the gaps in your communities that may need addressing and may need community action. And we facilitate this work through the Healthy Carolinians of the Outer Banks, which is a partnership of engaged agencies and stakeholders that look at these reports and then create focus groups work groups to address any gaps in what's discovered in these health assessments. So today we're going to present the information that's been extracted through the Community Health Needs Assessment, and also share with you where we're going in the work that we're going to be focused on over the next 3 years. Introduce you specifically, you met Kelly before, but Kelly Netton, and she's our Public Information Officer and Communications Specialist with the Division of Health and Human Services, and she is really the backbone for us in getting this monumental task done, as far as keeping us on track, working with the public, working with the community, the partnership, and then putting all this together, not just in this format, which is the big book of data, but in what's a much more friendly, easy to understand format. So she does phenomenal work for us, and she's actually going to walk us through this year's assessment.
Welcome, Kelly.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Okay, make sure my slide advancer is on. Okay, so I'm just going to run you briefly through some of the pages in the book that you've received. The first slide, it talks a little bit about the methodology. You won't find that in the manual, but I want to make sure you have a good understanding of kind of what goes into this assessment. And we have primary data that we pull from, and that is what we hear from our residents. We do focus groups and community surveys. Secondary data we pull from all kinds of different sources. It could be North Carolina State Center for Health Statistics, CDC. And then once we get that information pulled, we move into the prioritization process. And so from there, we look at a watch list of items, and then we determine which ones we want to look at more closely. And then we move into the action and the evaluation phase. So we come up with action plans, we submit them to the state, we let them know what our health priorities are going to be. I also wanted to just make note that this is a regional effort. We participated in this for the first time ever. We are one of 33 counties that actually did the exact same assessment across the board. So what's really unique is now we can look at numbers across Eastern North Carolina and see kind of how we compare. So Dare County, a great place to drop your anchor. That is, we are on page 6 in your books. So what we have found here, and this was from our survey, that Dare County, 52% agree Dare County is a good place to grow old. 72% agree Dare County is a great place to raise children. 50% agree Dare County has good health care. 82% agree that Dare County is a safe place to live. 57% agree that Dare County has plenty of help for those during times of need. And 17% agree that there's plenty of economic opportunity in Dare County. So a little bit on the demographics overall, we have a population of around 36,000. We're about 50% male-female. We are, if you look under the average age section there, we are a little bit older when compared to the state of North Carolina, and that can be explained by the individuals that move here for retirement. Let's see, we are a little more educated when compared to the region and compared to Eastern North Carolina. So this is actually on page 8. So this is the watch list. So what we did is we looked at the data, we looked at all the indicators across the board, and then these were the priorities that the partnership ranked. So number 1 would be the most pressing issue, and number 10 would be the least pressing issue. We vote on several different elements, and then we average them out. So based on this watch list, the Healthy Carolinians of the Outer Banks decided that we really needed to focus on mental health, substance abuse, and transportation. Another element that we look at with the assessment are causes of death. And on this chart, you'll see the rate from the last assessment we did and the rate from this assessment. So far, we've seen decreases in heart disease, chronic lower respiratory disease, and pneumonia and influenza. Mental health. We have seen an 85% increase since the last assessment in death by suicide. In North Carolina, it is the 11th leading cause of death, and it's the 8th leading cause of death in Dare County. We have 1 mental health provider for every 640 residents, and when that's compared to the North Carolina ratio, North Carolina has 490. Poor mental health reports, we had 11.3% reported mental distress. And then here at the bottom, 19.2% of community survey participants reported poor mental health that kept them from normal activities in the last 30 days. So a little bit about substance abuse. So some health behavior data that we pulled, we found that 18.2% reported drinking excessively, 16.5% reported smoking. We have a liquor store density of 28 stores per 100,000. Community survey respondents in substance abuse, we had 32.4% respond that they had engaged in excessive drinking 1 or more times in the past 30 days. And another factor that's not noted on the presentation, but survey respondents expressed concerns with shortage of alcohol and drug counselors to help with treatment. Another thing that we heard a lot in the focus groups is people didn't know how to get treatment. So a little bit about what we found with transportation. 3.4% of households have no car. 2% of households have no car and a low access to grocery stores. We obviously have some geographical barriers when it comes to transportation in Dare County, and that is noted as well. Let's see, 1.6% report walking to work, 79.8% report driving alone to work, and that's kind of right there in the middle between the United States and North Carolina data. Access to health services. In the community health rankings that's done nationally, we ranked, out of North Carolina, we ranked 31 out of 100 for clinical care rankings. We have an estimated at 87.1% with health insurance, which has increased over time, but we're still not meeting the mark that, that they have requested. So mental health providers, residents to providers ratio, so this includes mental health, and doctors and dentists as well. So we've already been over the mental health number, but the primary care, we have 1,700 to 1, whereas in North Carolina, we have 1,420 to 1. Non-physician primary care, 1,284 to 1 in Dare County, 975 in North Carolina. And then dentists, 1,560 patients to 1 dentist. In North Carolina, 1,830 there. So older adults, just because we are a little bit older in Dare County, we do like to make sure we're paying attention to this as well. So it's something that we always report on. We have seen some numbers move in a positive direction with older adults. So 31.8% of our population is 45 to 64 years of age. 20% is 65 and older. And as you see, compared to North Carolina and the United States, we have about 5% more there. Older adults at risk, we have 26% that are 65 and older living alone, 4.2 65 and older living in poverty, 5% 65 and older that have low access to grocery stores, which kind of goes back to the transportation piece. And you'll find as you look throughout this book, a lot of this data kind of crosses over because it's all interconnected. Let's see. Cancer. So the good news with cancer is that our rate is lower when compared as across all cancers with North Carolina and the United States. So where we have room for improvement compared to our peers, oral cavity and pharynx cancer, we are a little bit higher than North Carolina and the United States. Same with pancreatic cancer, we're in between North Carolina and US there. Ovarian cancer, we are higher than both North Carolina and the United States. So moving on to prevention and safety. Let's see, we do have, an issue with drug overdoses, deaths in Dare County, unintentional poisonings, we have 19.4 deaths per 100,000, and that rate is higher than both North Carolina and the rates of the United States. There is lack of knowledge, as I've mentioned earlier, about addiction and prevention services, so that can lead to difficulty when individuals go to get help. 17.2% of Dare County households report at least one of the 4 housing problems: overcrowding, high housing costs, lack of kitchen or lack of plumbing facilities. And when I dug a little bit deeper into that data, we found that the majority of ours is attributed to the high housing costs, which I'm sure is not surprising to any of us. Healthcare, navigation, and literacy, how people reported receiving their information. We had 44.9% report getting that information from a doctor or a nurse, followed by 32% from the internet. We also found that we had some opportunities as far as what the residents felt like they needed or would like to see in health education initiatives. So holistic options to chronic disease, nutrition, and weight loss were some of the high-ranking suggestions for health education. So built environment, we were ranked number 3 out of 100 counties in North Carolina for our physical environment. Low access to grocery stores, we have 5% of people 65 and older, 6.1% of children, 2% of households with no car, 7.4% of low income. And one of the things that you will see in the book is we did want to highlight all the physical activities, opportunities that we have already built in with Dare County. So we have tons of county recreation facilities that are available to residents, as well as parks and beautiful beaches. So the economy, our median household income is around $55,000 a year. 29.6% reported owning a home, and that's compared to more than 55% in both North Carolina and the United States. The average rent in North Carolina is, or I'm sorry, the average rent in Dare County is $1,050 a month, and in North Carolina it's $816. So there's a little bit of a difference there. The average mortgage, which actually is a whole household cost, so it's not necessarily the mortgage, it could include escrow and electricity and things like that, $1,652, and compared to North Carolina, $1,243. Okay, so on to what we have decided to do based on this data, what the partnership has decided to address. We have had the Dementia and Alzheimer's Task Force since, I believe, the 2013 assessment. They have done some amazing work. They're led by Diane Denny. And so we have elected to continue that task force. They're doing a really great job. We also are going to continue our Breaking Through Task Force, which you guys heard a little bit about at, I believe, the October meeting. They're going to continue to work on addressing communication and stigma, as well as providing information for individuals that would like to see mental health, like to seek mental health or substance abuse treatment. We're also working on getting a transportation task force established. And we also currently right now have, instead of a task force, we wanted to come up with an access to healthcare work group because access is such a broad issue. And so we actually have Ronnie Sloan at Outer Banks Hospital who's leading that initiative. And right now they're doing lots of fact finding, trying to determine what opportunities we have to address. We also have the Adult Collaborative on Mental Health and Substance Abuse. And right now, they worked on initially getting more information, doing more fact finding, and now they're going to be working on working directly with employers to educate them and educate their employees about mental health and substance abuse. So as far as what we're going to do amongst these task forces, the Breaking Through Task Force is going to work on their public awareness campaign that's going to focus on reducing the stigma. The Children and Youth Partnership, and again, this is an improvement plan that comes from everyone in the community, every group in the community that's a part of HCOB. So the Children and Youth Partnership is working with creating a mindful-based well-being program, and that will eventually be expanded into all of Dare County schools. The Saving Lives Task Force is working on creating a substance abuse action plan that's going to align with North Carolina's opioid action plan. And the Adult Mental Health Collaborative, as I mentioned earlier, they are working on assessing the services inventory as far as Dare County. It's probably really hard to read, but I wanted to just note, as Sheila mentioned earlier, this is not just myself. This is a huge group of people that come together to make this assessment possible. And the Outer Banks Hospital is a big partner in that. So I just wanted to make sure that I showed that. And then if you have any questions or you'd like to download the full report, you can visit darenc.com/HCOB, and you can download that right to your computer or device.
Thank you, Kelly. Any questions from the board, Kelly?
It's just, Mr. Chairman, I'm impressed she did that without taking a breath.
Yeah.
Great report. Well done. You're good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Some great data, and I had the privilege of seeing this initially last month, and great work on y'all's part, Kelly. It's some very good information for us to have.
Well, and thank you very much for having us. This is something I'm obviously very passionate about, but you all have been very supportive of HCOB and of public health, so thank you very much for allowing us to come. Happy holidays.
I just had a quick question.
Yes, sir, Commissioner.
Yes, sir.
And it's actually for both of you guys. Thank you so much for it. It's very informative, very good presentation. I cannot tell you how many meetings or occurrences where we discuss the substance abuse problem. And my question is a bit more on how do we go upstream on this? Do you guys, and again, I'm not looking for like, hey, here's the silver bullet or the solution, but any brief thoughts on how going upstream on it so that rather than treating the victim or the poor person that's, caught up in this, how do we get ahead of it? Any additional thoughts on that?
Well, Commissioner Ross, that's the $1 million question. And
we're fortunate in Dare County with the initiatives that we do have going on. I mean, Wally and the Saving Lives Task Force. But some of the newer initiatives that are being launched, Kelly mentioned the Children Youth Partnership and what they're looking to do in the schools. The work now in the school system with the ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences work. To go upstream, you really have to start down at the fundamental level with children and families before it hits this. And so
It's the
that's where a
adverse
lot of the initiatives
experiences.
are.
Sheila, every time I've seen it, it goes back to that adverse childhood experience and then the follow-on of what comes in the years after.
Right.
So I think, yeah.
So, and that work in Dare County is really just within the past year started, year and a half. So I think that's, if we're looking at how we're eventually going to get upstream, but it's going to take all of it. It's that to hopefully make some change over time, but it's these other initiatives to kind of keep our community in support. I can't even imagine what our statistics would look like if we didn't have support in the community and the private providers and the collaboration with the Saving Lives Task Force. But it is, as you know, so multifaceted that without all of the different spokes that we have, I just can't even imagine what our community would look like. Absolutely.
I'd also like to add that I think some of this with the young people is stigma. So while young children might not have a stigma towards certain issues, their parents do. And so sometimes a child could be expressing concerns and the parent's scared that kid's going to be labeled. So I think that could be a piece of it as well, which we are working on addressing as well in Dare County.
Anyone else? Commissioner Couch?
Interesting that with your insight and expertise on what our kids up in teenage are faced with, I'm really grateful seeing the faith-based groups. And I know down in Hatteras, these church groups are bringing in a lot of kids and just trying to set them straight because there's so many people pulling on them. So it goes back to that circle of contribution that we have, not just with Human and Health Services, but all the people playing on the field. So thank you for your leadership role in all of this.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Chairman, item 12 on the agenda, Lee Nettles is here for the Dare County Tourism Board to request a consent expenditure from the short-term unappropriated line item 4999.
Good morning, Lee, and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Board of Commissioners, the Dare County Tourism Board recently reviewed and made awards for its annual tourism impact grants. I come before you today to request your consent on these expenditures, which are funded from the Tourism Board's short-term restricted fund. The Tourism Board's the Tourism Impact Grant is designed to assist Dare County nonprofits and governmental entities with programs and services needed due to the positive and negative impacts of tourism. This year, we're pleased to recommend funding for 7 projects, 2 on Hatteras Island, 2 in Manteo, and then projects in Duck, Southern Shores, and Kildova Hills. Altogether, these 7 projects will receive $851,002 from the Tourism Board Restricted Fund, improving public safety and the experiences for locals and visitors in these areas. As with all restricted fund expenditures, these grants will be paid on a reimbursement basis. I'm happy to answer any questions with regard to the specific projects or any other questions you may have.
Any questions, Lee, of these expenditures individually?
It's been a pleasure to be able to, over the years, reinvest around $10 million back into the community from the tourism proceeds.
That's great. Absolutely, Lee, it's commendable the amount of money that's been put back in the community on behalf of the Tourism Board. So.
Move to approve.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor by Commissioner House to approve the Tourism Board consent expenditure for short-term unappropriated funds, and I believe it's seconded by Commissioner Tobin. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion then signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much, Lee.
Thank you very much.
Happy holidays to you.
Same to you.
Mr. Chairman, item 13 on the agenda is a request for a public hearing for the text amendment to the Highway 345 zoning district, and Noah Gillum's here to tell you what that's all about.
Good morning, Noah.
Chairman, Commissioners. Deer Pits LLC has submitted a zoning amendment request to amend the Highway 345 Business Zoning District. Deer Pits LLC is seeking the addition of commercial storage yards to the list of uses offered in the area zoned Highway 345. The Highway 345 district applies to the southern portion of Roanoke Island. Any text amendment to the Highway 345 district would apply to all land zoned Highway 345. The Dare County zoning ordinance already defines commercial storage yards as follows: an open site to provide space for a fee for the storage of boats and boat trailers, recreational vehicles, travel trailers, and campers, automobiles, utility trailers, contractors' towable storage trailers, and similar types of vehicles and equipment. This does not include the dry stack storage of boats. The current permitted uses in the Highway 345 already allow for such uses that are more intensive, such as boat yards, boat and motor displays, and travel trailer parks. The Dare County Planning Board reviewed the text amendment at their November 12, 2019 meeting. The Planning Board found that the proposed text amendment is consistent with the 2009 Dare County Land Use Plan. For the proposed text amendment, staff recommends using language that is currently used in the Sky Code Neighborhood Commercial District and most recently adopted in the C3 Commercial District. A copy of that language is attached for the board's review. It is my recommendation that the public hearing be scheduled for the December 16th, 2019 board meeting, and a draft motion is included for the board's review.
Okay. Is any questions of Noah? That being said, is there a motion to schedule a public hearing on December the 16th at 5:30?
Move to do so.
There's a motion on the floor by Vice Chairman Overman to do so, and it's been seconded by Commissioner Bateman. Any further discussion? Hearing none, then those signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous. Thank you, Noah.
Thank you.
County Manager?
Chairman, item 14 on the agenda, as a part of the revow process that's coming up in January, back on November 4th, you all were presented with the schedule, standards, and rules for the real property appraisal. After that meeting, you set a public hearing on the 18th of November, which we had and has been conducted. And now the last step in this process is for you all to adopt those standards, rules, and schedules for the real property appraisal so that Greta and Hosey and their team can go forward with the revow on January the 1st. Hosey's here if you have questions. I don't know if you do, but he's here to answer those questions, and if not, then you all need to approve the schedules, standards, and rules for real property appraisal.
Any questions, Board, of Greta, Jose? Oh, Greta's not here, but Jose is. Then what's the pleasure of the board?
Move to approve.
There's a motion on the floor by the Vice Chairman to approve, is seconded by Commissioner Tobin and House. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous. Great work, Jose. Thank you.
Chairman, item 15 is the consent agenda. On the consent agenda, you have the approval of the minutes, the budget amendment for Beach Nourishment Fund, Water Department budget amendment, works time contract, and a road request for Sherwood Drive in Manio.
So moved.
There's a motion on the floor by Commissioner Couch to approve the consent agenda as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner House. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, one of those requests on the consent agenda was a road request for Sherwood Drive in Manio.
Right.
DOT has come back to us and said that any of those road requests that we've made that we did resolutions for that are more than a year old, we have to do a new resolution if they have not acted on those. What I'd like to do is get authority from you all for the chairman to re-sign those resolutions as they come forward so that we don't have to come back each meeting or make people wait 2 weeks when we get a notice and that kind of thing. And they're signed by the clerk, or then give the clerk the authority to sign those resolutions. again, so that we can just do the administrative part of bringing those current. You've already adopted them, and we would just redate them to whatever date they request.
Yeah, if we've already approved them, I wouldn't see a problem in just updating it.
Okay. You need a motion on that?
So moved.
Okay, there's a motion by the vice chair.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner House. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
Item 16 is the presentation of the fiscal year 2019 comprehensive annual financial report, and Dave Clausen and Bob Taylor are here to make that presentation.
Before we get started, let's take a 5-minute recess. I'll call the Dare County Board of Commissioners meeting back to order and turn it over to County Manager.
Dave?
Dave, welcome.
Thank you. This is, we're just a little bit early this year, and I'm gonna thank you guys because our internal audit and budget position freed Sally and I up to do work earlier than we normally do. The report's already been sent last week to the State Treasurer's Office, to the Local Government Commission for their review, so everything's subject to what they say. I'm going to first introduce, and you know Bob Taylor, he's our partner with Potter and Company. He's done our audit for several years now, and he's going to briefly go through what their results were, and then I'll do a PowerPoint fairly briefly on our results for your audit for June 30th, 19.
Welcome, Bob. Good to see you.
Thank you, Chairman Woodard and other commissioners. I appreciate the opportunity to have a few minutes on your agenda today to assist with presenting these audited financial statements. As we've done in the past, I'm going to just cover a few highlights, present our auditor's report, and then we'll turn it over to Dave, and he'll do a little bit deeper dive into the to the results of the audit, results of the operations. So if you have it in front of you, the very first part of the audited financial statements is a letter of transmittal. I like to refer to this as kind of the state of the county report. It's several pages in narrative form of kind of just general economic conditions of the county and how the county reacts to those and economic development and all these different things. So it's a really good kind of a prelude to getting into the number crunching side. The next item that you'll find is our independent auditor's report, and that's just the results of the audit that we did, and I'm pleased to say that that is without any exceptions, so that's a good thing for Dare County. All the way in the back of the audited financial statements, there are 3 other letters, and those are reports that are in regards to the audit work that we do over federal and state financial assistance programs. And also for those 3, there are no exceptions, so that's a great thing. Following our independent auditor's report is the management's discussion and analysis. And this is several pages, again, in narrative form that are a comprehensive summary of the results of operations. And this has been put together by your internal staff. And this is the basis for a lot of what I know David's going to do with his PowerPoint presentation. So it's always a good read to get into and read that part before you really just start turning pages and get all caught up in all these schedules and all these other reports that are in there. Because Dave does have a much more comprehensive presentation, there are 3 things that I would like to highlight. One of them is in that management discussion analysis is a benchmark for your fund balance, your unassigned fund balance. Fund balance is kind of our equity, and we refer to fund balance on the side that's on our budget-based financial statements. And there's a part of that fund balance that we're required either by state statute, or it's either committed for another purpose or it's assigned for another purpose. But the part that is unassigned is about 27% of our budgeted expenditures. And I think that you all have a target of somewhere between 19 and 21%. So we have exceeded that target. And if you reduce that down, way back in the day when David and I first started doing this, kind of the Local Government Commission, one of their benchmarks that they put out was 2 to 3 months of operating expenditure. So if you reduce that down percentage-wise, that's about where we are. 25% of that would be 3 months. So we are, I think, at a good, healthy position. And what that enhances cash flow. So that puts us in the position to make sure that, everything operates smoothly and everything runs smoothly. Another highlight is in your self-insurance fund. Many years ago, the county decided to self-insure, which is kind of a mix between the traditional insurance model and then us kind of paying as we go along. So for many years, we were internally funding that, protecting ourselves against catastrophic claims with co-insurance and all those things. But, we're not immune to the rising healthcare cost, just like any other business. Governments are not immune to that as well. And so the past few years, starting 5 or 6 years ago, our costs were beginning to exceed the amount that we were budgeting to go into to cover those costs. And we ran into a situation where we had a deficit in our fund balance for that fund, which created some other reporting items. And so, when that came about, I know that you all worked very hard on a budget basis to try to correct that, and we have done that. We finally fixed that last year, and that we were able to fund it enough to get rid of that deficit. And this year was an even stronger year. So I think we added like $1.4 million to the fund balance of that self-insurance fund. So you're certainly to be commended on that. The third highlight, and I'm going to take a little risk here. I'm going to go back and do a little history lesson in fund accounting and governmental accounting at the risk of trying not to get too technical on this. But I think it's an important thing for you to look at as far as kind of how your bond ratings are going and how these financial statements are presented. Almost 40 years ago now, believe it or not, when David and I first started doing this, traditional fund accounting, you kind of had two different ways. You had governmental funds and you had proprietary funds. Well, proprietary funds were our enterprise funds, our water and sewer fund. Everything was kind of based on budgetary accounting. We budgeted to spend money, we budgeted to receive money, and that's the way it went. But from reporting purposes, those proprietary funds were always converted to be more like a for-profit business. Even though we budgeted capital outlay as an expenditure and we budgeted debt as a revenue, we would make a conversion and convert that to a traditional for-profit model. We would put the assets on the balance sheet, we'd put the debt on the balance sheet, we'd depreciate the assets. But the governmental funds, we never did do that. And when we started doing this a long, long time ago, there weren't even standards involved. We had probably a handful of accounting principles that were guiding principles of how we were supposed to deal with the governmental funds. And then along, kind of fast forward to the late 80s, early 90s, the Government Auditing Standards Board was formed, and that became our standard setting board. And then we fast forwarded to somewhere around 15 or 20 years ago, that standards board was up to standard number 34 pretty quickly. And what standard 34 did was it said, okay, we want you also to present in these financial statements a conversion of those governmental funds to look more like these proprietary funds as well. So what that did for the governmental funds, which of course our general fund is the largest one of those, was it took our fixed assets, all of our governmental fixed assets, this building, the building next door, and all those things, and put it on a balance sheet. It also took the debt that we had and put it on the balance sheet. The challenge that we had in the state of North Carolina was because of the way our school debt is issued, the county issues that debt, but we do not hold those assets. So when that, yes, sir.
Being the expert that you are, Mr. Taylor, does that make sense to you?
No, it does not.
Aha. I'm holding my ground, Mr. Chairman.
I got you.
So the challenge that created when we made that conversion was now we had debt on there, but we didn't have a matching asset at the top. So the effect was the only place for it to go was to go against that net position, that fund balance. Well, that created a negative fund balance back 15 or 20 years ago. So it took some education for us to explain to our bond rating agencies exactly what this new anomaly was. So we got through that process, and then we fast forward to the last 4 or 5 years, and there have been a handful of additional GASB statements that have been issued that not only now have required us to take that real debt, like we had with school bonds and other bonds, and put it on that balance sheet conversion, but also some of this external obligations, future obligations that all governments have. And we have 3 main of those obligations. We have what are called post-employment benefits, which are those future benefits that we will provide to a certain amount of our retirees. We have our percentage of the local government retirement system, and we also have our law enforcement. So for their governmental funds for Dare County, that amount of debt is about $150 million. That now we had to put that on our balance sheet with no corresponding asset to offset it. Well, the offset for that was against net position. Well, that just threw that. If you've looked at your financial statements the last few years, that exhibit number 1, our net position has just been totally upside down. My point in saying that is because of what we've been able to fiscally be responsible in these past few years. If you look at that exhibit 1 right now, our total net position is a deficit of only about $500,000. Wow. And we're carrying about $150 million worth of that debt on there. So I think that going forward, for us to be able to have a position in front of these bond rating agencies, and you know why that's important, so that when we do issue debt that the county needs to do the things that we need to do, we can get it at a very, very favorable interest rate. So that's my long-winded story to that, but I think you certainly are to be commended, and I know that Dave will echo that in looking at these the financial statements. Yes, sir.
When doing so, do you guys prepare a sort of this is what it really means statement that reconciles this balance sheet with all of the debt obligations but not the assets, so that when explaining it to obtain the very low borrowing rates, the lending agencies or bond rating agencies can say, aha, yes, we see that?
Yeah, very much so. There are reconciliations inside embodied in these financial statements that convert from our budget base, the traditional fund balance, to that full accrual net position. It shows every item that goes in and goes out of it. So yeah, I think that there's a good roadmap here. And it's in, not only is it embedded in the statements as a separate attachment to an exhibit, but it is also in the footnotes as well. So it's there twice. And they've been very well educated on it. And not all states are this way. So, it's just, it affects North Carolina in a way that especially the school debt.
And it seems so clearly logical. I can't believe all the states aren't on board with this.
They all are on board with the actual standards, so they all have to have the standard.
County manager caught my humor there. Thank you, Mr. County Manager and Attorney. I honestly, Bob, I'm pulling your leg a little bit to have some fun with it, but it's so difficult to get a clear picture of, frankly, the very healthy and positive state that our financial position is in, with some of these complicating restrictions from the Government Accounting Financial Standards Board. It just makes it really hard.
Well, they've come a long ways, because right now we're at like 90, close to 90 standards that they've issued now since, the late 80s. So in 20 years, they've gone from not even being in existence to really rocking our world. To now there are 90+ standards that we have to adhere to in all these governmental reporting. But anyway, that kind of levels the playing field and makes it good for all of us in the local government world. Right. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dave and let him to give you some additional information.
And each of you, whenever I say the report, you've got hardbound copy of the actual report, and then what I've done with the slides is put page references. I noticed I missed a couple, but I just intending this to be a reference for you if you ever need to know where to look to find things in the big report by page number. So, and as I mentioned, this is all subject to local government commission review. We haven't gotten their comments back. I expect them pretty soon since we were in early. Okay, and I'll go, there's some overlap with what Bob's done, but I'll go quickly, I promise. As he said, we've got what's called now an unmodified opinion, so it's a standard, what we call a clean opinion, no exceptions, no findings. Auditors will also issue a management letter if there's things they saw which aren't important enough to be an audit finding, but a recommendation. We have no management letter. The major threshold for the grant testing that Bob mentioned that goes into the back of the report is $750,000. There were no material weaknesses. That's a financial term. There's no findings in question cost. And every year I say I'm jinxing us because the last finding that was related to a grant was in 1996. On the federal side, they tested Medicaid, state programs. They tested Medicaid, the lottery money, which is the Public School Capital Building Fund, a stream debris removal project, and the rural operating assistance, which I think is a transportation grant. We had, there's a schedule in the back, starting at page 219, $4.7 million worth of federal money that flowed through the county for grants, and $1.2 million of state money that flowed through for grants. That's different from what has been in the past. Social services and a little bit of health and health do eligibility work where the money doesn't flow through the county. It goes to the recipients that have been determined to be eligible. That used to be on our statements in this schedule, and it's not anymore. But we're still responsible for paying for, if we're selected to be part of the sample, we're responsible for paying for the state testing that they have our local auditor to do. We didn't get selected this year, but when we do, we pay for it. You saw before today, and Chairman, thank you for the presentation, but it's certain things in the report are done for the certificate program, which is it's a plus for every unit of local government that does it. It helps with ratings. It helps with the quality of the report. And we've done it 28 years in a row for last year's report. I'll be submitting this one before the end of the month. And again, just as a reference for the structure of the report for you,
Dave,
everything in the back,
when you go through it that way, it sounds, oh yeah, ho-hum, routine. I just want to point out, it's not. And these guys, Dave, Sally, their team, cooperating in support with our external auditors, Potter, it's just really good work. It's done well. County manager, I know you're supervising all this. And again, it was delivered in a matter-of-fact tone, but I wanted to point out it is anything but matter-of-fact, so thank you. Sorry.
No management letter either, ever, in quite some time.
it's been some time. When I started here, the management letter was 16 pages long. And this is just a reference, as you go to the back of the report, everything bills and summarizes back to the front. So the full accrual statements that Bob was talking about are what we call the government-wide there at the, yeah, you're going the wrong way. There, government-wide at the very bottom. Nobody talks about that to their board. I probably spend more than everybody else because, as you said, there's not comparability between states. There's not comparability between counties and towns. And it's whether or not it really means anything is a hard thing to get a grasp of. The ones that I really suggest you look at are what we call the basic financials, which are more the budgetary, and the fund balance statements, which are on page 32 and 33. Bob mentioned there's other sections of the report. This is just to tell you kind of that they're there, but there's also different reasons that they're there. The transmittal letter, and there's a statistical section, which are requirements of this certificate program. The required supplementary information is a requirement for all your pensions and the retiree health disclosures. Every time we do a public sale of bonds, we covenant that we will do this, participate in this Security and Exchange Commission continuing disclosure requirement where I have to file by the end of January certain schedules and this audit report. And if anything happens during the year, we've got to go on that EMA website and do another continuing disclosure. Then the new things we had to deal with this year, just GASB 89, we don't have to capitalize interest for debt, for interest expense from debt for construction anymore. 84, what we used to call trust and agency funds, you now call custodial funds. Those are us collecting occupancy taxes and then distributing it to the towns and the tourism board. And then the turned out the big one for this year, I didn't think it would be as big of a deal as it was, is 88 on debt disclosure. So what's happened is that you do a public debt sale of bonds and you have to participate in this continuing disclosure. The other option is if it's a short enough term or a small enough debt deal, we privately place them with a bank or a financial institution, and that didn't have those same disclosure requirements. And people, institutions that own your bonds say, well, we don't know what's going on with these small deals. You could have covenants they're gonna hurt us as we hold our bonds. So now we've had to add all this information, split those two pieces apart in the footnotes in the report and add all this information for the private placements, just like we had with the public sales. Okay, and as Bob said, on the full accrual page, the business type is your water fund. Positive net position of $56 million. That's mainly from fixed assets and infrastructure. The governmental, which is everything else, the general fund, beach nourishment, inlet maintenance, 911, except for those fiduciary funds that I mentioned. That's about $50 million of activity that's not in here. But it's a negative 572,000, which is really a very good number because of the items listed below it. We have school debt of $47 million where we carry the debt, we don't carry the asset. $138 million for future retiree health, $8 million for landfill closure. Our share of the pension liability for the statewide system is $11 million, and then the law enforcement officer separation allowance is $2 million. And again, those liability numbers are everything that's calculated for retirees and current employees that you have to pay out from here until they're gone. You know, it's whether or not it really means anything, you know, but the idea is to get the numbers out there so everybody's aware of them. Your results for the year, your general fund added $4.7 million. It's revenues over expenditures. That's a big number, but your budget's grown to over around $110 million. So that's 4.11% of expenditures. Beach nourishment, $3 million to the good, which is pretty close to what we had in the model. Inlet maintenance, $4.8 million to the good. And I put this one in there so you guys are aware that as we do the dredge money from the state, we got the first $5 million before the end of the year. We'll get the next $10 million this year, but that's going to be fund balance because we're loaning the money out as a forgivable loan. So you'll eventually see that fund have about $15 million of fund balance or more. And then Bob mentioned we had an improvement in the insurance fund again of $1.4 million. Your fund balance in the general fund ended up $44.8 million. The unassigned fund balance is $29.5. The difference is around $15 million, and that's restrictions by law and commitments by the board. So the restrictions by law are small amounts for register of deeds, health, sheriff. The big one is restricted by state statute. There's a state law that says it's intended so that your revenues as of June 30th that you hadn't realized in cash, you can't use those in your next year's budget. That was the original intention. It's been a little bit massaged, but and then an example of a commitment is disaster recovery fund, where we've got a fund balance committed by the board for disaster recovery activities. The unassigned fund balance of $29.5 is 27.03%, and you know our target's 19 to 21, and we talked about that during last year's budget with the capital investment fund. We're going to work with DEC and Associates and bring you a revised policy during the budget process that's coming up. Then in the general fund, your revenues, $2.3 million over budget, which is 2.15% of the budget. Expenditures, 4.4 under budget, which was 3.84% of the budget. There's on page 23 in the MD&A, there's an explanation of what I mean by indirect cost. It relates to how we budget school nurses and school resource officers. It shows that is so that that cost is within the sheriff department and the health department where they report to, but it's also so that we, quote, get credit in state reports for the cost of school, expenditures for nurses and resource officers.
And Dave, just for reference, the general fund, as you said, without indirect, increased 2.3 million over budget revenues.
Yes, sir.
The total revenues would then be?
Got it right here. 109.9 million.
So that's on page 33, 109.9.
Yes, sir.
And obviously, my next question, total expenditures, 109.3.
Yes, on the same page, yes.
Okay.
Okay, revenues for the year. These are percentage changes for the big ones, and these are gross before they get distributed out to everybody, being the county or a town or the tourism board. Occupancy tax went up 3.27% on gross collections of 30.5 million. Local sales tax is a 1% tax that comes back where it's delivered. 3.28%, and that was 18 million gross. And both of those, remember, had Florence, the effect of about a week of Hurricane Florence in them. The statewide sales tax, which is returned to us based on population, that's a 0.5-cent sales tax, and 6.2% up, but the revenue's only 4.2 million, shows you how much of a difference there is between what comes back to us based on what happens here versus population. And then the land transfer tax, about 7.5 million of gross revenue and 4.86% increase. And then we mentioned the insurance fund several times, and you've seen the same graph the last 10 years. On the blue item is what happened during the year. No, the green item is what happened during the year. The blue is the fund balance that happens. So we are in our 5th year in a row of positive results. Last year, we ended up just barely with a positive fund balance. This year, we had a fund balance, we ended up with $1,488,000. And I'm really pleased with that. But doing his job, our manager pointed out to me that we're like one lung transplant away in the health plan from that being gone. So we'll continue to work on it. Okay, sorry. You go to the next one. Okay, my fault. The water fund, still good, positive results. Our net income, 37,000 to the good. That number's the last 2 years has been a lot lower than it has been in the past because of depreciation expense, because we capitalized the Roanoke Island expansion and the automated meter readings and the expansion and replacement, the nanofiltration at the Skyco treatment plant. So depreciation expense is hitting us. But as far as revenue bonds go, they care about coverage, debt, cash flow versus debt service. So we ended up the year at 2.2 times coverage for debt service. The rate model projected 2.13. As I said, the Beach Nourishment Fund ended up with 29 million, almost 29.5 million. The model projected 28.9. You remember there was a budget amendment on your consent agenda in the meeting or 2 meetings before you approved 250,000 for feasibility for each of Frisco or Avon and Southern Shores. That's where that came from, where I told you we could do that. Disaster recovery, we've improved to 850,000. Our policy right now says 750. We're going to take another look at that policy and bring it back to you at budget time.
Just real quick again, the disaster recovery definition for this particular balance, Because we've got unassigned fund balance, which obviously could be used in the event of a disaster.
Right.
This one specifically, though, has been set aside.
It goes into what we call the committed, which is really the difference between your unassigned and your total. It's one of those items. So it's not a law restricted, it's a committed by the board restricted. That makes sense?
Feels like a little bit of belts and suspenders. This
Yeah,
fund
that's a good
balance.
description. You get credit for it, but you could change it today if you wanted to. C&D landfill, 1.8 million of fund balance, but remember, and that we have post-closure and closure costs to pay for in the future for all the sales, and that's explained in the footnotes on page 91. The 911 fund ended up with $1.1 million of fund balance, and that was after we added $345,000 from Terrell's balance and $252,000 from Hyde's. We're not getting any money this year, fiscal year 20, from the state 911 board because of that fund balance level. We've still got a commitment from their staff that I've got a note on my calendar to meet with them in January as for next year's funding, and they have still committing that, you know, they're gonna fund based on the regional 911 system, not just our old one. And then sanitation, $1,985,000 of fund balance. That's a $300,000 decrease. We've known about that for some time because remember, you've got a tax basis growing by 1.5% and tipping fees are growing by 5 to 6% per year. A structural imbalance is eventually gonna catch up to us and we'll have to do something about it.
Dave, excuse me. Sorry. On that E911, would you go back to a minute and talk
Yes.
about the Terrell and Hyde?
Well, when we did the regional consolidation, part of the agreement with state 911 was that whatever Terrell and Hyde had left in their 911 fund balance would get moved to DARE and, you know, restricted and have to be used for the regional emergency communication system. So they moved those fund balances over to us and as part of us, and we were running the entire region. Now, the state 911 board has a policy that says if you have a fund balance, 911 fund balance over 20% of, that's 20% over what you spend on 911, we're not going to give you any money until that fund balance comes down below that 20%, which is where we are because those other fund balances got moved over.
I guess what my question was with the impact of the storms in Hyde, particularly on Okotoks that everybody knows about. What is this going to do?
Nothing, because this is, of all the restrictions of state monies, this is the most restrictive, and it's got to go for those 911 operations and those.
And that's for the dispatch operations.
Right, just the dispatch
The
operations.
state gives us, and gave Hyde before we consolidated, annual dollars to cover certain things. And as you accumulate those dollars, if you don't spend them all, you get a fund balance, and your fund balance will grow just like any fund balance if your spending is less than your revenues, and that's what occurred. What they told us was that you can't have more than 20%. So if you get to 30%, you got to use that 10% as your operating revenue until you get it down to 20, and then we'll come back and give you money again. So when we took the Hyde and the Terrell money, put it with our money, our fund balance grew way more than the 20%. So they're saying you spend that money until it comes down to that 20% level, and then come back to us, and then we'll do the formula and tell you how much you get from us for your operations for the coming years. And that's what this is telling you.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and you can't use that money for any other purposes.
Anything else? Gotcha.
Right. Yeah, then back to the retiree health. You are one of 8 units in the state that have set up an irrevocable trust fund to offset the cost of that future retiree health. We ended up the year with $1,569,000. The annual return for last year is 5.62%, which was actually lower than the average annual return since we started it in 2009, which is almost 8.5%. And then the custodial funds I mentioned were just money we handle for other people to send to other places, is another $50 million of activity that's not in the statements. The section of the report I think is most useful, and I say this every year, is the statistical section. It's got everything listed here, it's got 10 years worth of information. And some examples of what is in there and how you can use it, just very quickly, is debt service as a percent of your expenditures. What rating agencies look at is that's how much of your budget that if something really, really bad happens, you can't do anything about. So if it's 20%, well, you can't touch 20% of it. We ended up last year at 15.52%, which is a big improvement. 20% is kind of their limit. They look for somewhere around 16 to 17%. You just did something on revaluation, sales to assessment ratio. You can see before the recession, we were down to like 92.46%, where tax value was 92% of average sales. In 2013, we were flipped, where average sales were 29% under tax values. And now, just before we reval, we're down to 83.49. That kind of relates to, there's other information in here, but you can see what's happened with value of personal property up to $420 million in the county. If you remember, that big jump from 18 to 19 was what the tax department did with boats, a good part of that. And then motor vehicles, you can just see a steady increase every year.
Just a real quick one on the sales to assessment ratio percentage.
Yes, sir.
The slide that you had where it shows us at 83.49% 2019. One more time what that means to the layman.
The Department of Revenue does in each July, they take a sample of sales from the prior year, and they calculate the sale value versus the tax value. And what this is saying is that the tax value on that sample was 83.5% of what it actually sold for.
Thank you.
Okay. Next one. Okay, got it. No, one more. One more. Okay, and then the final one is just a history of food stamps, which is very recession related. Green are number of individuals, yellow is number of households. You can see that it lags a recession and it recovers, and that continues. And that's everything Bob and I have, and if you have any more questions, please let us address them.
Any other questions of Dave or Bob?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Dave, do you see anything looming on the horizon that might impact, do we need to be looking out for something forward, or is it just kind of steady as she goes?
This year's about as steady as she goes as we've had in a really long time. There's some accounting stuff coming. Leases is going to be a huge mess. That's in 2 years. Even operating leases, we've got to effectively capitalize where the expense is not going to be your lease payment anymore. You're going to see a lot of little towns that suddenly have a lease that turns into a piece of debt that wasn't approved by the local government commission, and nobody said what they're going to do about it yet. We won't have any of those, but it's going to be messy. But that's the one that's coming for us. Other than that.
The reassessments are not going to have any, that'll be mostly a positive impact.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Dave. Bob, thank you for your time this morning. I know it's a good drive for you, and I appreciate you being here.
Glad to do it. Thank you all.
Yes, sir. Happy holidays to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Chairman, just two things I would add to that. One is, this is an excellent financial report, and we're proud of it, and Dave and his team do a great job. But our staff also does a great job. I harp on it at every staff meeting. I'm sure they're sick of me talking about it, but the staff works really hard to try to manage what they do to get the results that you all saw there. And so real proud of them and want to thank them for their efforts during the year as well. The other thing that we do is we talk a whole lot about bond ratings and those kind of things. And bond ratings are important for our debt and saving money there. But they're also important for me and for you all and for the public in that these are the eyes of financial experts in New York that look at our financial picture, and they tell us when they give us a good rating number that we're doing things the right way. We're doing what we're supposed to be doing. We're handling it the way we're supposed to be doing. And that kind of feedback is invaluable as you all go forward making the decisions that you get. So those are two good positives that come out of this.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. With that said, we'd move to item 17, and this is the construction manager at risk contract for the Health and Human Services project. In your packet, you have that contract. We've reviewed it at our staff level. It's there for your approval. If you have questions about it, please let me know. We'll try to answer those questions, but if not, then that contract is there for you to approve.
Any questions of Bobby? Is there a motion then to approve?
So moved.
Second.
It's a motion by Commissioner Tobin to approve. It's been seconded by Commissioner House and Bateman. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
Next are your board appointments. You have the Board of Equalization and Review. The Board of Equalization and Review submitted the names of Nelson Jones, Jonathan Waddell, Jeffrey Scott, Terry Gore, and Charles Evans for reappointment. On file, you have an application for Alan Moran and David Hines.
Move to approve as submitted.
Motion on the floor by Commissioner House to approve as submitted. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner House. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
Next is the Special Motor Vehicle Evaluation Review Board. That board submits the names of Danny Couch, Doc Sawyer, and David Light for reappointment, and there are no other applications on file.
Move to reappoint.
Motion on the floor by Commissioner House to reappoint. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by the Vice Chair. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
And then your upcoming appointments, in January, you have the Tourism Board where you have 7 terms that expire, and you have the Working Waterman Commission where you have 2 terms that expire. In February, you have the Planning Board where there are 3 terms that expire, and in March, you don't have any appointments. And that would be your agenda, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, County Manager. That brings us to item 19, Commissioner's business and the manager's business. Commissioner House, would you kick that off today for us, please?
Yeah, I'll be kind of short today. I do want to say a big thank you to this board in supporting Billy Beasley and his family. They were actually one of the very first people I met when I moved here, and they've been a long-term staple in Dare County for many, many, many years. As a matter of fact, when I first moved down here, I was living in the trailer park right behind Billy's Seafood, so it was nothing for me to run right around the parking lot and grab some shrimp and have dinner. So very much appreciative, and they've been outstanding citizens in Dare County. Also, my little date in history. You ever wonder why the new cars the new models and cars seem to come out in the fall? Well, in years past, when automobile was first coming up, companies would introduce a new model at any time of the year. Ford Motor Company, Henry Ford wanted to keep the Model T running. He wanted to keep that vehicle as their mainstream vehicle for years to come. It wasn't until his son, Etzel, told him, so we need to update. Everybody else is updating, we need to update. With reluctance, Henry Ford said, okay, let's do this. They designed and released under a big fanfare The 1927 Model A was released on this day in 1927. And because of that impressive display that the Ford company did in displaying it is now the reason why most manufacturers now put their new vehicles out during the fall. So that's just a little brief insight into history. And for that, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Interesting.
Teslas.
Have y'all seen that new pick-em-up truck?
Teslas?
Yeah.
That new pick-em-up truck? Wow. Talk about 22nd century. That's interesting stuff. Problem is the windshields don't hold up, do they?
No.
That was class.
The Vice Chairman. Up to you.
Oh.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All I have today is to thank Wilma Parks for her 20 years of service and congratulate Jody White on being Employee of the Month. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Commissioner Bateman?
Yes, sir. Just want to give a shout out to, everybody this time of year comes together for Thanksgiving, and the folks up at Liberty Christian Church, I think they served 1,200 people.
Wow.
Is what I
Wow.
heard. And they also went to Ocracoke, and I know they took a bunch of turkeys down there, and they had a staff down there was cooking turkeys for them, which is great. It just proves the Outer Banks, once again, is what makes us who we are, is the giving part of the community that we have. Just remind everybody, this Friday is Room at the Inn, the only fundraiser they have. We are having it at the Creek. It's not a moneymaker. It's there to raise money for Room at the Inn, which supports the homeless in the Outer Banks. And what it does is supplies a place for them to go and have a place to stay. And one of the churches, get a hot meal and get a bath. And it supplies a great need for the community. Give you some history on Billy Beasley and the crew up there. So we sold, I was raised on a bread truck down here, one bread truck. And Billy's was, I thought it was before 1971, but 71 sounds right. With just a little concrete building. The first time we went back there, we took a couple of Twinkies and a couple of honey buns, and business was not good. There wasn't a whole lot going on down there. And for a couple of years, they struggled. But those guys have made a great strides. It's the place to go for seafood. They have contacts everywhere. They ship seafood all over the place. And they're great, original Outer Bankers. I'm just telling you. Billy Beasley is one of the original, him and Judy both, and been friends of mine for years. And it does my heart really warm to know that they've been here this long and worked as hard as they did to get where they are.
Oh, yeah.
Good people.
It's the American dream.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing
That's all I
that.
got.
Thanks for sharing that, Earl. And by the way, thanks. I know you provided your truck to do deliveries at Thanksgiving and stuff at Sugar Creek.
I had a blast. We went to the EMS stations, and what they did, people who couldn't work, they were working that couldn't go and eat somewhere, they wouldn't, I delivered to the EMS, I delivered to the fire departments, all over the place. Food lines,
Right.
McDonald's, the CD, and then back to individual property owners back in like Compton Harbor.
Well, I commend you for that.
That room at the end is on the 6th, and it is at Sugar Creek. It's at 5 o'clock. We got 20 restaurants that are gonna be there. Everybody's giving their time, giving their food. Like, this is not for money, folks. This is to raise money for Room at the Inn, and it's a great fundraiser and good time. Last year, I think we did like 250, 300 people. A lot of good food, all you can eat.
6 o'clock?
Yes, sir. 5 o'clock.
5 o'clock.
5 o'clock on the 6th.
First come, first serve.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Y'all will get a seat if you come in.
Commissioner Couch?
Yes, sir. It's amazing that on this board, we've all had interactions with Billy's Seafood. But I think one of the things that probably underscores their success as a small business. So even when I got out of college, one of my selling newspaper advertising over on the beach was Judy Beasley helped me learned that details are important. I mean, something like an ad, she read through that. They pay attention to the details in a small family business. Those guys, they live and die every day with that business. I mean, you look at soft shell season and stuff, and then, I mean, how detrimental that kind of life can be to your health, but you got to gear up, and they did. It just didn't happen. The behind the scenes they worked at, and that was a good choice for, I was proud that this board brought them up on a really good Thanksgiving down on the island. They were catching fish. The weather, thank goodness, was good. You know, a lot of people need that last hurrah, and I know it's busy up here as well. But that last little hurrah there, it makes or breaks Christmas for a lot of people. So thank goodness that we had a good Thanksgiving. And it was going to get kind of dry here for a couple of months, but we've had a good year. Listening to the audit report through June 30th, we'll see how this report this time next year, and I'm hoping it's with good management that this board and certainly the county staff is doing and managers, that we're going to see another very positive report at this time next year. Lastly, I am encouraged that the county here, we are continuing to fine-tune our communications with some of the things we're dealing with the flooding. Just want people to know that we're not sitting back on our hands waiting for things to happen. We're not looking at anybody to take a leadership role other than the leadership role that we will take going forward. And I appreciate this board and also our public relations department as we look at these weather forecasts and just the constant contact that is going on among the people and the entities here to properly manage that. So I look forward to continuing to fine tune that communication process. We've got a lot of capable people here. It's just a matter of coming up with a plan, fine tuning the plan. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Tobin?
Yeah, I just have a couple things. I had the pleasure of meeting Bonnie Bennett for her official facilities tour. It's normally given by an ombudsman or an ombudsman representative for the state. But they called me and asked me if I'd do it for them. So I took her on a tour of Spring Arbor and Peak Resources, which is the last step for her to be appointed to the Community Advisory Council for that. So I'm assuming sometime in January she'll be officially appointed. We had a conference call on the dredge changes. As I've discussed before, the dredge is now about 95% designed. So we had a conference call between Jensen Maritime, EJE Dredging, and Harry Schiffman and myself to go over all of the things that we had kind of flushed out on our tour of the boat down in Houston. The call went extremely well and got really narrowed down what we were going to do on it. With that said, after that, we were able to have a special meeting of the Oregon Inlet Task Force to officially approve the 95% plan with those changes that we had discussed on the conference call. So it was very well attended. We went into closed session because the plans are proprietary and can't be shared. Had a very good discussion amongst the entire task force, passed a resolution to approve, and they're doing the last 5% now. Just so everybody kind of has an idea of schedule on it, it's going to be going after it's completed. It comes back for an official approval by the task force. Then it goes through the bidding process. We're probably looking sometime early 2022 for delivery.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
But we're getting there. That's all I got.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Ross.
The wheels of government continue to exceed all of my expectations in terms of speed.
They're really small wheels.
2022, huh?
Uh-huh. You know how lawyers are. The legal process will take forever.
I'm looking at one right now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a couple of things. On Tuesday, tomorrow at 2:30, we're having our first meeting of this Tourism Board Task Force that will meet to review the strategic options available regarding the event site in Nags Head and how that project will proceed. Obviously, I'll keep everyone here apprised of any discussions and how those advance and from where the input comes. Again, that's tomorrow at 2:30. Number two, just so everyone's aware, Commissioner Overman and I may have been, and I think we have been, advising the board about a Medicaid transformation that is occurring statewide, how it affects Trillium, healthcare, mental health, developmental disorders, substance abuse. That has all been stopped. That is suspended because the budget in the state legislature with the governor is in a stalemate. And therefore, on the last Trillium call, which I unfortunately was unable to dial in, but I know Vice Chairman Overman was on, that was a primary topic of discussion, and it leads me into my third comment, which stems to what we heard from Dr. Davies regarding mental health and the booklet and information she provided. And I just wanted to call out a couple things, not as an answer, but frankly, something that's rather alarming. In Dare County, suicide has increased 85% since the last health assessment. 85%. The rate is 19.6 per 100,000. That is 50% higher than the state of North Carolina average. Something is going on here, guys. I don't know what it is. I just saw these statistics and numbers this morning. And County Manager, I guess I would ask if it might be appropriate to get perhaps a further, and I'm not saying special project, but any sort of assessment from our department as to what might be some of the underlying causes of these kinds of increases in mental health disorders. Again, I'm not saying let's commission a big project, but I was just wondering if there's any more behind just what's in here that might help us understand better.
I mean, just off the top of my head, you look at that number, you convert that per 100,000 to per 35,000. I don't know what that gross comes. I mean, it could be we had 2 more suicides that skewed our numbers because our suicide rate was low.
And that's fair.
I don't know the answer to that.
And that is fair, yes, yes. And it may be as simple as, Rob, it's really the law of small numbers here. The percentages look big, it's actually just a single or a second instance, and that'd be fine. I'd be happy to accept that. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Ross. I'll just have one more thing, and that's just a reminder that our former planning director, Ray Sturz, his funeral is tomorrow at 11 a.m. So, County Manager?
I don't have anything.
Okay. Dorothy, our Public Information Officer, do you have anything for us today?
A quick reminder that we're now accepting applications for the Governor's Award, Volunteer Service Awards. That's a great way to honor, it can be an individual, a business, a group, or even a paid director of volunteers for ways that they give to our community. And we're accepting nominations through January 8th. That's on the county website. So keep that in mind if you know of someone. It's not a difficult process to get them nominated, and then in the spring, they'll be recognized here at one of your meetings. I just wanted to mention that.
Good deal.
That's a really good thing, too, that if I could add a little bit to it. I was lucky enough to receive that with a group of the Interact kids with Manio High School for the work that we did for relief work when we had that, I can't remember which hurricane it was, but, and the thing for the kids, they didn't even understand what they were getting. I said, put this on every application that you ever do. And several of them have, and it's really worked out to their benefit on some of the things, but it's a great program.
Super. Thank you, Dorothy. Dave, anything else for us today?
Just quickly on Hurricane Dorian, we meet with FEMA every Wednesday. Tomorrow we're going to go over the survey for Buxton Beach Nourishment, got done last week. So we'll have that report within a couple of weeks.
Oh, good. Good deal. Thank you. Well, with that being said, is there a motion to adjourn until December the 16th at
Motion
5?
to adjourn.
Motion by Commissioner House. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by the Vice Chairman. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.